Hello everyone and welcome to the Evangelist Nick Garrett channel. So Pope Innocent III began soliciting particularly talented and loyal Catholic orators to try to win back the Cathars by debate, particularly those Catholic clergy who had become Cathars. It was quite common for the Cathars to debate Catholic priests at the time, particularly after Pope Innocent's first attempt to win them back by strong preaching. The most infamous of these debaters for the Catholics was the well-known founder of the Dominican order, Dominic Guzman. In one particularly famous debate, he took the bold step of accusing the Albigensians of outright heresy. He said in what by modern standards would actually be a compliment to a believer, "It is not by the display of power and pomp, or by gorgeous apparel, that the heretics win proselytes. It is by zealous preaching, by apostolic humility, by austerity, by seeming, it is true, but by seeming holiness." What Guzman meant to be an insult in their time was the idea that they only seem, or that they fake everything they do. Guzman argued that the holiness of the Albigensians was counterfeit and should be overcome by true Catholic holiness. In 1206 AD, sensing the pressure from Rome and angry at what they viewed as an attack on their liberty, the Albigensians made a confession that said, "The church in Rome was not the church of Christ, but the church of confusion, drunk with the blood of the martyrs. The church of Rome was neither good nor holy, nor established by Jesus Christ." This was the first time such an open and aggressive challenge to the theology and presence of the Church had been made. Particularly toward Pope Innocent III, this would prove an unfortunate tactic to take. On the other hand, it showed how limited government and the freedom to practice their own faith had awakened and emboldened citizenry that was not known for mob rule, but high intellect, self-control, and faith. However, the Catholic concerns over the region and geopolitical threats were real, and likely not something the Albigensians on the whole had considered. This may be where Pope Innocent was coming from with his attempts to bring them back into the Catholic fold, if his intentions were good. Dominic's attempt to win back the Albigensians by preaching failed. In fact, during what may have been his last-ditch attempt at the famous Colloquy of Montreal in 1207 AD, he was rather humiliated by the knowledge of the Cathar leader Benoit de Tournai and his masterful use of scripture. It's hard to know for sure, but at least in this setting and on this day, Guzman was outmatched and embarrassed. He was so humiliated that some suggest it was a turning point for Guzman that led to a crisis of his own faith from which he would begin to think in terms of revenge. A researcher named James McDonald wrote of the colloquy, quote, "Guzman was humiliated by his failure," end quote. Speaking on behalf of Christ, Guzman promised, quote, "slavery and death," end quote, for those who failed to come under Rome's papal authority. To carry out his threat, he eventually formed the Order of the Dominicans. Later, the order, in addition to a great deal of important charitable and contemplative work, was also used at times to carry out the Inquisition. Once planning developed into an actual crusade against the Albigensians, it was Simon de Montfort. He would lead the famous crusade against the Cathars, styled historically as the Albigensian Crusade. This was the same Simon that had walked away from the Fourth Crusade because of its baser principles. This was the same Simon that became a Templar Knight and fought for the Holy Land. Yet another example of the contradictory nature of such good motives fallen to human baser lusts. Quote, "The crusade of Simon de Montfort so utterly destroyed them," Cathars, "that Simon tamped out not only a people, but a literature," end quote. With actions like those becoming commonplace, it is accurate to say that in some instances the Church was becoming drunk on its own power and in part bloodthirsty. In hindsight, one can see myriad reasons why mixing the spiritual leadership of Christianity with political and economic interests led to simply pervert it from the inside out. To her credit, popes came along from time to time that realized it and tried their best to institute greater vision, often though to no avail. The Western Church had obtained so much wealth and power that keeping, protecting, and perpetuating the power structure and information that had defined it began to take precedent over the accuracy of the truth claims of God it was meant to house. The crusade itself was violent and unfolded over many years. An active, battle-hardened military from several nations now ready at the drop of a hat to crush its own for the church. Christianity could never be the same after what had been done to the Cathars. That was, in fact, among the subjects of a fourth Lateran council that convened sometime between 1213 and 1215 AD. They addressed calling another Holy Land Crusade to Egypt, taking the Cathar lands to be redistributed among their own, establishing updated excommunication procedures for heretics, and formally instituting a form of confession, one that might be recognized today. The Middle Ages, a concise encyclopedia edited by H.R. Loyne, minces no words in defining that the Albigensian Crusade was motivated by the papacy's desire to take land in southern France from the Cathars and give it to his own nobles and lords. It might be disingenuous to say that that was the only reason. As was heard in the previous two videos, matters were complicated. Society had, in fact, given the Church the authority to frame objective reality, and the Albigensians had, in fact, at least in part, engaged in a dualist belief, heretical to Christianity. In what probably serves as just additional proof that there can be no one mainstream narrative that's trustworthy on the Albigensian genocide, estimates range as low as 4,000, up to 10,000, up to 60,000, and into the millions. All potentially credible sources. Perhaps the reason it's so hard for us to understand the Albigensian Crusade in our time is that we have no such shared objective reality anymore. Christian theism has been eroded and has given way to a developing form of secular humanism that has yet to actually develop any type of moral certainty. However, for somebody looking back, the idea that a collective people would subscribe to one objective truth is hard to swallow. To both a post-Reformation Christian world and a post-Christian secular world, the Albigensians appear as heroes for standing by their beliefs. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to talking to you next time when we turn our eyes back to the Holy Land, south across the Mediterranean and into Egypt for a fifth crusade. And we meet a figure named Frederick II, the Holy Roman Emperor, and we learn about a fascinating relationship that existed between he and Pope Innocent III. I hope you'll subscribe to my channel and look for more videos this week ranging other subjects. Talk to you next time.